Good morning, everybody. Hope your day's off to an awesome start and a brand new week, and a short week at that, because Friday is a public holiday and so is next Monday. It's a big, long weekend coming up. I hope you're ready for that. Okay, so being Monday, we'll get started. Leigh-Ann is... oh, look, she's not there. Show everybody there's the empty space where Leigh-Ann would be. She decided to sleep late, and she will be joining us, but just in a short while. What's also cool is we're going to be joined by Chris Hart, the economist, a little bit later on. Chris, a very well-known person in South African commentary, somebody who's had quite a lot to say about very, very many of the things that affect you and me. The bottom line, the cost of stuff, what our rand is worth, all of those things. And I thought, you know what, instead of us just sitting here and moaning about it, let's find out from somebody who does this for a living, not moaning, but figuring out how things work, and especially with regard to the economy. So Chris Hart, South African economist and investment strategist, will be joining us to talk a little bit about what's most likely going to be the scenario here in South Africa for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, as much as it's possible to do that. And also find out what he thinks of what is going on in geopolitics, how that affects us. So instead of just sitting here and laughing or crying about it, we're going to actually get someone who knows what they're talking about. Also do some weekend sports recapping with James, who's, he's just raring to go on that front. Dr. Hanan will join us in a little while for a little bit of getting our heads right first thing on a Monday morning. And I'm especially interested to hear from him today because I saw a horrific stat yesterday. I think it was Kaya Dlomo, maybe, who said he was going through some stats from Discovery this weekend. Have you got that graphic, James, that he put up on his Instagram or Twitter? And here's a scary, scary number, right? So here you can see breakdown for all ages. These are the causes of unnatural deaths by age. So obviously, these are just policyholders with, in this case, Discovery. But look at that number there for suicide, okay? All ages, motor vehicle accidents account for 23%. High, but then that's kind of the most dangerous place you can be is in a car. Suicide, 35%. And then if you look at that number for people between 51 and 60 in South Africa, half of the chart, light blue color there, half of that is suicide for the 51 to 60-year-olds. The 41 to 50-year-olds, it's a big chunk. It's the majority. It's the largest plurality of causes for deaths, and that's suicide too. And then over 60, there's also quite a lot. And between 31 and 40, there's quite a lot too. Now, 45% of unnatural claims for ages 41 to 60-year-olds were from suicides. And I hate to start the Monday on a downer, but that is a terrible statistic. I don't know if it's hugely higher than other countries. I'm not sure if we are an outlier in this respect, and I would need someone who does this for a living to be able to give us a proper contextual look at these very, very worrying statistics. But even if you just take it at face value, I mean, that's a frightening number. 40 to 50% of people, it's just frightening. Let's take the low end. If it's 40, that's just too many people who are contemplating suicide or have actually done it. These are the ones who've done it, right? You can only imagine how many more have thought about it but never went through with it. So something to think about there. And not a good thing to think about, but something you actually need to pay attention to. Congo Chris says if you break it down by sex, it'd be even worse on the male side. That is true. We know that in America, the leading cause of death for men that is unnatural, in other words, something that wasn't a regular cause of death before, diseases, that kind of thing, infections, the stuff that'll take you out because there are bacteria or viruses or things like that involved. Here, I think we're rapidly approaching the number that the Americans are at, and it's more male heavy. Men are much more likely to commit suicide. It's just a frightening idea and bothers me. I've never thought about it. I'm not going to bullshit you and pretend that I have, but I know lots of people who have, and I know lots of people that have done it. And let me tell you, it's a pretty final thing, hey? You decide to do that, there's no real going back. Let's try it again, but this time with a little bit more of this. Russell says men die younger than women because women don't have to put up with women. Russell, you keep talking like that. We'll see how many people you have in your life by the end of it. The sample should actually say demographic and the number of people. Yeah, that would probably be useful. Hugh says, wonder what's the most popular form of suicide? I think overdosing. I think it's probably pills. Any other thoughts on that? I don't think a lot of guys are doing, or girls are doing violent things, like guns or whatever. But you do have those stories too, especially I know that the police were dealing with a very, very bad kind of spate of suicides in the police by police officers who had guns and that would be their first port of call, is to use the gun. So glad we're all still here, those of us that are. Well, Dave, that is not a happy set of statistics back there. Go to Japan, they have a mountain dedicated for suicide. Well, in the medical profession, anesthetists and dentists have the highest number of suicides. Yeah, I believe so. Certain ideologies cause suicide. I won't say which, but we all know. I think you got to say, because I'd be quite interested to know which ideology makes people want to kill themselves more. I don't know. Super Jacob Zuma says white males guns. I don't know. I don't know. That I just thought that this was an interesting thing for us to have a look at. And I do agree with you. This is a very, very heavy topic for 6 a.m. Africa, but I'm not going to ignore it. Transgenderism. Okay, well, transgenderism's tiny, tiny group of people. Really, really minuscule group of people. And I know that there is a huge propensity for suicide. And it doesn't get better if you have the bottom surgery, as they call it, where you will change your outward appearance of the sex that you would prefer to be assigned to. That does lead to an increase in suicidality. But all right, I just thought frightening thing and better on a Monday than if I bring this up on a Friday when we're trying to be happy and get into our weekend. So you got plans for the long weekend? Are you going to be doing anything for Easter? I saw lots of Pesach celebrations for our Jewish friends over the weekend. I know that Christians are starting to get into Palm Sunday was yesterday. And then, of course, Easter Friday is this coming week. And we get the Monday off because Easter Sunday is the big one. So if you are doing something, tell us what it is. I would love to hear. Call me crazy, says Gray, but the abandonment of a religion causes suicide too. Absolutely. Because it removes hope and it removes belonging for so many people. And that's important. All right. Dirk says, data is all about trends. Are things getting better or worse over the years? Don't know. We'll have to look into it. I'll tell you what's getting worse is my mic's ability to stay erect. My mic is flaccid. It's very embarrassing. No plans, says Lee. I'm working at night, prefer it that way, and relaxing during the day. Well, that's very good. So I spent Thursday afternoon and Friday, and then came back on Saturday from Sun City. Had a lovely time. Ran up those stairs so much. I must have had, I don't know. We've gone up and down 50, 60 times on the stairs that go to the rides at the Valley of the Waves, like a kid. I don't know how to explain this to people. They're like, what did you go for? Did you go on golf tour? And I'm like, I don't play golf. Did you go for gambling? Are you a big gambler? No. Although I did manage to, in the casino on Friday night, I managed to put 600 Rand in and played for 2.5 hours, which I think is pretty damn good. Didn't lose more than 600 Rand. I mean, there were some guys at that table who were losing money hand over fist. One dude must have put in the time I was there, probably 20,000 Rand, gone. Just gone. And there's something horrible about getting hungover, right? And you wake up the next morning and you're tired and you're hungover and you feel like you wasted the night. And I'm sure that would have been the case for many people who were frequenting the bar. Fortunately, I had an early night myself. But it's a horrible, horrible thing. Way worse in every way. If you find yourself waking up hungover, tired, and you're 20,000 Rand down. I don't see how that ever makes anyone feel better. So glad I'm not a gambler. But yeah, I tell people I went to Sun City and they're like, well, what did you do there? Golf, gambling, what were you there for? I'm like, Valley of the Waves. But you're not a 12-year-old. Like, yeah. Anyway, Gareth, I sent you an email. I hope you get to soon. Sorry, it's a bit long, Mapello. Yeah, Mapello's full of opinions these days. I think it's time you start your own show, because I did read your email. You want to hear from Mapello? You want to hear his email? Yeah. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing because, as he said, it is a bit long. And he says, I wanted to write to you for a long time about the show, even being on the show 2 weeks ago. I'm very worried about the direction the show's taken in the past year. Let me give you and the team some credit first. The show's great, blah, blah, blah. But he basically says, the show has been a huge part of my growth. I've learned so much about how to stand up for myself, how to debate properly, develop a thicker skin, taking accountability, etc., etc., etc. I used to share clips of the show after every episode with my friends on WhatsApp and social media. There was plenty of important and relatable content to everyone on each episode. Now it sounds like it's targeted to a specific minority demographic, not like before when we had people from different backgrounds, culture, etc., tuning in every day and engaging. If I'd come across the show for the first time as it is today, I would only listen for 1 or 2 episodes and forget about it. I know you're all about quality audience, but I think now it's become too specific. All right. So, Mapello, normally my response to this is to be like, I get 10 emails a day from people telling me how the show should be. Start your own. Okay. And you don't have to listen to the show, and I don't really mind. It's totally up to you. I'm not sentimental about it. If it changes again, it'll be changing for the better. Otherwise, why would we change it? And as for going for a smaller minority, I don't know what you mean. Are you thinking like we're trying only to appeal to white people, rich people, males? Like, what's your angle there? Which minority demographic are you referring to? Because as far as I can tell, we try to keep things interesting, and interesting doesn't really have a demographic. You know, we'll go from talking about black women's hair to talking about what your poo says about you. Thank you, James. I mean, those are two very different things, and I think they can appeal to anybody. But you know what? You got to keep listening. If you don't want to listen, stop. You'd miss out on people like Chris Hart today, and you would have missed out on Tolas Mo last week. And I don't see how those people could possibly be going for the same demographic. They're not talking about the same things. I love that. I like that we keep it different. Anyway, if that's the impression you're getting, and other people are also getting that, perhaps, I haven't seen evidence of that, but okay. Thanks for the feedback. Delete. There it is. Okay, good. Okay, so now, if it wasn't interesting, we wouldn't be here, says Lee. Okay, guys, I don't want to turn this into a fight between like Mapello's opinion of the show and everybody else's, because that's not interesting. It really isn't. It's just not interesting to anybody. What I do want to talk about is this. I'm worried about the burning platform, says Ricky. This is free content and GC's world class. At least I get to this close on this dose, rather, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Yeah. And you know what? I do think that there's room for us to change it again. So having lost the burning platform as part of the change that we've made here, there may be room for me to do a kind of more serious one-on-one interview in a across the desk format, which I've always enjoyed doing. There are some 20,000 hours of those, which are available online anyway. So I don't know how many more I have to do. I mean, when is enough, right? But this show, the way that it works, is fun. And until it stops being fun, we'll do this. And I'm happy to have constructive feedback, by the way. So don't climb into Mapello, because maybe he, comes from a good place. Doesn't sound like he's being an asshole about it. Okay, so this is what I wanted to get to. A couple of other things I've sent to James that I want you to see. So, they're doing these toys, right? Everybody's doing these these versions of themselves in a plastic box with them as an action figure. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so I think I showed you mine the other day. Everybody at the office is doing them. Have you got the one for the single mom? Just show everybody. This is the single mom one, which is great. It says drama, 98, gaslighting, 91, weaponized empathy, 87, entitlement, 86, perjurative respect, 79, and co-parenting ability, 04. So there she is. She's a single mom. She's got a cell phone, by the way, with a cracked screen, because all single moms do. There's a bottle of wine. There's some crazy pills. There's a poop scent spray, a Starbucks coffee cup, a Hyundai key, and then her quote, which is, "It's not about you, it's about the child." And it's called the Toxic Times Family Court Series. Isn't that great? The single mom, this time with 30% more delusion. So there we go. Single moms everywhere trying their best, but just not getting what they really want in the world. And that is respect, right? Have you seen the Madeleine McCann action figure? No, neither have I. In fact, there it is. It's still missing. Is it too soon? Too soon to joke about her? No. Shame. All right. Very good. One of the things I did see over the weekend that I thought was fascinating and I wanted to share with you this morning. This is a video the guy took in a town in Mexico. So, you know, it's partly a Catholic thing, but it's partly a South American thing. While Mexico isn't actually technically part of South America, a lot of the traditions in South America are the same as the traditions in America. North America, that is. When people die, there are vast cemeteries where people erect these mausoleums. You know, like the ancient Egyptians would have had pyramids, or the famous one was the mausoleum of Halicarnassus, which was built by a prince of somewhere along the Turkish coast. And he built this enormous mausoleum for himself. Later on, Augustus would build one in Rome. Later on, Hadrian would build one, which is now the Castel Sant'Angelo, which is pretty much the entrance to the Vatican along the Tiber River. But these are places, the huge funerary monuments that people would build to outlive them, and in which their mortal remains would lie. And in Mexico, there's a thing that the cartels have done. They've established a whole city that looks like it's a living city, but it's actually a city of the dead. And the amount of money that is spent here, because these guys just don't know what to do with their money. So while they're alive, and because their lives are probably short and violent, they build these mausoleums. And this dude made a video. I think it's called Real America, Real American Voice. He goes into one of these mausoleum cities, and you cannot believe how much people are spending on their tombs. I mean, this is frightening. Can we play that for everybody? Watch this.
I've been to some crazy places before, but this has to be up there as one of the craziest. This is a cemetery. These are all mausoleums dedicated to cartel bosses in Culiacan, Sinaloa. These aren't houses. These are mausoleums, tombs, like the tombs of Egypt for the pharaohs, except these hold the narco kingpins. And each one built larger to one-up their competitors. It truly is unbelievable. The amount of money that the cartel makes. They have so much money, they don't even know what to do with it. To the point where they build million-dollar mansions to be buried in. Monuments to some of the most evil people that have ever walked the earth. Here in Sinaloa, Mexico. All propped up by a government that's as corrupt as they are.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, huh? All those buildings, no one lives in them. Some of them have plumbing because they've got like a little place you wash your hands, for example, or they've got electricity because people switch on the lights in there, believe it or not, at night. But they're just dead people in there. They're no living people. They're tombs. And they're built, as the guy in the clip says, for some of the most evil people in the world. These are maniacs. They're criminal warlords, basically. You know, people who are in the drug cartels or the human trafficking cartels. I mean, not great people. The sort of people you would not want to encounter in life, and whom in death, I think we're all pleased that they can't move and cause more cuck, but not good. So they should try it here. The Nyaupes will be moving in. Yeah, I was thinking about that. So all of these tombs, some of them you saw, they're like glass entrance halls and staircases. And if we had those in South Africa, it wouldn't take long for homeless people to move in, right? They would. They wouldn't even care that there were dead people in there. They'd be like, we'll come and live here anyway. Have you seen the ones built here for the taxi bosses, says Carl? I would love to. So if we have them, here's some ideas for people who want to become content creators. Go out and make a video like that guy did of those. Just pop it on YouTube, and I'm sure people will watch. Please don't come to Durban for Easter. We have no water, says Durban Dope. Isn't it also true that all your beaches are like full of turds again? I heard this over the weekend, that apparently 3 of Durban's major beaches have very, very high E. coli levels, which means, what does it mean? People are shitting in the water again. Yeah, they're shitting in the water. What can I tell you? So no, I won't come to Durban. In fact, I haven't been back to Durban for 3 years now? And I used to go there every year many times. So I don't know, count me out. Yes, Durban is a shit show at the moment, says Lee. That's about right. Okay, well, we have some other things to talk about this morning, which I think you might be interested in. First of all, the Netherlands is looking for South Africans with these skills. So, all right, you want to complain about how South Africa is a difficult place to live in, blah, 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 blah. Cool. So where are you going to go? Or what are you going to do? Well, the people of Holland, the Netherlands, facing a shortage of healthcare and engineering professionals, turning to South Africans to fill the gap. Beaver Recruitment South Africa, which is a new recruitment agency, I'm not making this up, by the way, this is not a joke, is helping place and train South Africans for jobs in the Netherlands, where demand is growing, especially for healthcare workers. The country offers attractive benefits like competitive salaries, a 30% tax break for skilled migrants, and a good work-life balance. Selfishly, I would rather we didn't lose healthcare workers. You know, with the shadow of NHI looming, we're going to need good healthcare workers. So if we're going to send some of those, even just a handful, to the Netherlands, that's our loss and their gain. Can't stop people from doing what they want to do. Free market of ideas, free market of labor. You should be able to choose who pays you for your labor and where you deploy it. And I'm not going to stop you. But we're going to need even more. And in fact, we already have a shortage of really good healthcare workers in South Africa. So I don't necessarily think I like this. Call me cynical, but I don't know if I like that. Also, the fact that you can do all these things now, I mean, it is exciting to live in a world where it's entirely possible for you to have a job, especially in certain kinds of industries, certain kinds of work. You can have a job here, but they pay you from there. Now, that would be cool. And I think there are a lot of people who really want to do that because you can earn it in... Oh, there goes Leigh-Ann.
Hello.
She walks right across. Did you think you weren't going to be seen?
I stood down.
You walk straight across here. James is showing you to go around the side. Then you're like, James, did you have a late start this morning?
I just thought I'd sleep in a little more. You know, just.
Don't worry, it happens to the best of us. Happens to me often too. All right, James, get ready for your sport. We'll do that in a second or two. How are you, ass? How was your weekend?
Yeah, well, good. Good. I ended up. Isn't it funny how you feel guilty binge watching when you're by yourself, but if you do it with other people, you feel okay?
Really? Is that the thing?
Yeah. So I did with my mom and my brother. We watched Frasier.
Oh, wow.
And just that, I don't know if you remember a lot of it, but that one episode where they take it out of the studio and they go into a room and they create this whole theatrical scene where they've got boards to make the thunder, and
Oh, wow.
everyone's got their roles. But obviously, being Frasier, everyone stuffs up the whole way through. Just that whole live radio vibe. That was fun to watch.
It's such a funny show because, and we'll get to Dr. Hanan just now, who's like our on air psychologist.
Yeah.
But they were such a fucked up family. Like the dad was this grumpy and curmudgeonly old man. Then Niles, the brother, was a total disaster.
Yeah, and I think autistic.
Oh, for sure. There was
Yeah.
something going on there. And then there was Frasier, who also just couldn't ever keep it together.
No.
So in so many ways, just like every other family.
Yes.
No one's better than that. All right. So while we're talking about the things you did over the weekend, I don't watch a lot of TV.
Mm-mm.
I don't watch a lot of anything. And actually over weekends, I've become like, I'll maybe do a movie or something if I'm at home and I've got nothing else to do.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to watch.
There's so much.
I found the White Lotus series good. Yeah, I eventually finished that. It was decent. I don't think it was a waste of time. But the kind of you make an investment in time, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you just feel after watching a movie like that wasn't worth the hour or 2 hours or 2.5 hours sometimes. No good.
Yeah. If you're going to set aside time, then it's important what you choose.
So how do you decide?
But sometimes
Do you read reviews?
Yes, I read reviews.
Whose reviews? Ever since Barry Ronger died, I don't know what the fuck to do.
Give it a scintillating 7.
Exactly. He used to tell us. It was so easy back in those days because we only had like 2 TV channels.
Yes, and we would wait a whole week for a review on Sunday.
And you'd have to go to the theater to watch movies. You couldn't watch them at home. So it was a major investment. We talk about, watch the show and it was rubbish. But you just sat on your laptop. You didn't even leave your house.
No,
It
you
didn't
just
cost
watched
you
it
anything.
on your phone in bed.
Yeah. So I used to, I'm joking, obviously, because I never liked reviews. I've always thought that people who do movie reviews, how can you do that? We all have different taste.
So there are a few people that I follow on TikTok.
This is why I'm asking you. I trust you.
I don't know who they are. I'm not like that obsessed with them.
Okay, so you don't have their
But
details.
their stuff will
all right.
come up, but they're like that. They're very good judges
Okay.
of good movies or good shows.
And these people will guide you to new things that you haven't seen.
Mm.
Are they
Very
good at the
often.
older stuff as well?
No, these are only for the new stuff that's coming out. Yeah,
Okay.
I
All
don't
right.
like watching older stuff always. I feel like there isn't time.
Well, my problem is that there's so many movies I haven't seen because I don't watch a lot of them. So, and there's a back catalog of so much good stuff. If I don't, I would think that actually the people who listen to this show probably direct me more than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm doing a deep dive and analysis on like how I choose what I'm going to watch, it's probably what I hear from the audience in this show. If you see a list of studio movies coming out this year, it's a bunch of nonsense, except maybe the F1 movie with Brad Pitt. If you're into F1. Okay, so I believe that that's brilliant.
Okay.
Because they filmed it kind of while the F1 was going on.
Mm.
So he would actually have been racing on the track at the same time and that kind of thing in order to give it this realistic, gritty effect. That's what I understand. So I might even watch that, even though I don't know anything about or care about Formula One. Mobland, Dope Thief, Gangs of London, Friends and Neighbors, says Lee. Okay. The new John Hamm show on Apple TV Plus is interesting. Otherwise, Landman from Tyler Sheridan is nice. Black Mirror is awesome. Mobland, Gareth, new series of Pierce Brosnan, Helen Mirren.
That's the second Mobland mention.
Okay. Yeah. Happy Gilmore 2 is dropping in July. That could be fun.
I also take advice from people who know me, family members who'll say, no, this is up your street. You would love it.
Oh, right.
You know.
I've been binging a really good series from the 90s. It's old, but really holds up. I think it's called Debbie Does Dallas or something like that. Says Congo Chris. If you ask Google, what is the question it is asked the most? What should I watch? It's sad, but there is an answer. Reacher. So is that the most asked question on Google? What should I watch? Wow. And it's taken us years of doing this for us to actually ever ask that question right here.
Yeah.
I don't think we've asked that before.
Yeah, that's interesting. I also saw recently that one of the most asked question between couples, and that can actually erode the marriage, is, what do you want for dinner?
Ooh.
So that's also something for decades that we've never been able to figure out.
Yeah. All right, James, come and give us the sport. Let's get that done. We've got Dr. Hanan still coming up. So that's our little appointment on a Monday to get our heads right. And Leanne's also got some stories to share with us. Signet says, I heard the new Snow White is cool if you're into shit shows. All right. Night Agent is good. And for expats,
Yeah, it's okay.
Thuiskoms was nostalgic. The Chosen and House of David are brilliant new Christian shows. Okay. All right, but let's get to the shows that most people watch over the weekend. Live shows, sports shows, things that are happening on grass where people kick things around. Leanne, you know those?
Yep.
And then they
Chase
drive
a piece
cars.
of cowhide,
That kind of shit.
run, bend.
They drive the cars on the grass. Well, they shouldn't, but occasionally they end up on the grass. Okay, so let's go, James. What do we got?
We had a car race this weekend.
Motor cars.
We did have motor cars.
Motor cars.
Formula
And
One.
where were they racing?
Bahrain.
Bahrain.
I didn't know how to say it with the accent.
Bahrain.
That one.
You know, Bahrain is an island.
I didn't.
Okay, so all the others are attached to the Arabian Peninsula, including, everything except those fake islands that they've made in Dubai
Yes.
and Abu Dhabi. But all of them are part of the mainland, even Yemen and those sorts of places. But Bahrain is actually an island. And apparently Bahrain is the fun part of that part of the world.
Right.
That's where you go if you live in the other parts, but it's too strict.
Okay, so you're allowed to drink and do things.
They turn a blind eye to some stuff. If anyone who is listening to us now lives in Bahrain, maybe you can fill us in.
You learn something new every day. I thought it was just part of the
Mainland.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you see, this is why I'm here. I'm here to help you. Help you not be an idiot. So, all right, Bahrain, what happens there? They drive fast cars around a track?
They did drive some fast cars. The orange car won.
Which one is that?
That's McLaren. Oscar Piastri won his 4th Grand Prix, if I'm not mistaken.
Is Orange having a moment? We should ask our creatives here, the art department here, if orange is the color of the moment, because I do feel like, and it's not my favorite color, but there seems to be a lot of orange back this year.
The Pantone color of the year is mocha mousse. So
brown.
So brown.
Brown is the color of the year. Huh? Brown.
Like a chocolate mousse.
Brown. I like brown. Brown is a nice color. Brown was very big in the 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it's made a comeback in fashion. So it's more your sort of bronzy browns.
I think I'm picking up an orange trend here. All right. Anyway, so the orange car wins.
The orange car did win, and the orange car came 3rd. So there was a lot of orange. You're right.
Good.
So orange Piastri came in 1st, Norris in 3rd. Russell and the Mercedes came in 2nd, and Verstappen all the way down in 6th. So not a great weekend for the Red Bulls, but a great weekend for the oranges.
Well, also, as somebody said here, Donald Trump is orange.
That's true.
That is papayas are orange.
Also true.
Trump wore an orange tie to the UFC yesterday.
Okay.
He was there. It's worse, Gareth. The color of the moment is mocha mousse, which is a soft brown shade. It's like poo, really.
It is like poo.
It's the color of poo. Datsun Brown says...
Yes, remember we had a gallery of brown cars at one point.
Pabalo says orange presidents are all the rage. The trend for orange is Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's color is orange, apparently, according to Bitcoin Boots. So much winning. So, yeah, maybe it's the moment of orange that you've been waiting for, if you're a big fan of orange. I think it's probably my least favorite color, but there we go.
Orange, you're glad that you know that now.
Leanne, are you wearing any poo brown today?
No poo brown, but signs of gold, no mocha.
All right. I'm
you're
not
a
wearing
winner.
any poo brown either. Oh, no. There's been a terrible accident. All right, let's go. What else, James?
The world of football. Also,
Yes, tell us about the world of football.
So Flex hasn't had a great weekend.
Oh, Flex, did your team lose again?
Not just one of them.
All your teams lost.
Yeah, that's kind of what
Jesus.
happened.
Well, go on. Lay it on thick.
So Sundowns, they played Chiefs. Sundowns were winning. Life
Yeah.
was good. Then they weren't, because that game ended 2-1 against Chiefs. Pirates beat Gallants 1-0, meaning the final for the Nedbank Cup is a Chiefs-Pirates game, and not a Sundowns game. And then the other game of the weekend that may have depressed Flex a little bit happened yesterday. Newcastle went rampant on Man United and scored 4 goals. Man United only responded with 1 goal, so not a great weekend.
So that's not great
for Flex. No.
All right, I'm sorry, Flex, but you know what? You also can't be a child. Can't let other people kicking a ball around determine whether you have a good weekend or not. You know?
Me, on the other hand, the Liverpool fan.
Oh, yeah?
Great weekend. Phenomenal weekend. We beat West Ham 2-1. We only need 3 more points to win the league. And another Liverpudlian that did well this weekend was Paddy Pimblett, who beat Michael Chandler at the UFC this weekend in the lightweight division. The Liverpudlians just doing all the things Liverpudlians need to do.
Well, that's nice for them because, it's a terrible place.
It's because I had those bed sheets at the age of 12. I'm telling you.
Yeah. But Liverpool's also a horrible place.
It's not a great look.
It's not on anyone's list of like top 5 cities in Europe they want to visit. In fact, it's not even on the top 50.
I don't think a lot of England is, to be honest.
But especially Liverpool.
But like the Beatles and stuff.
I would go to see maybe some Beatles-related stuff, but that's it.
I think if you went there, you wouldn't be doing touristy stuff. You'd need to get in deep and get in with a family and like have dinner with them, because that would be an experience.
Crackers and
exactly.
beer at lunchtime kind of thing.
Just get in with the accent, the culture.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and then leave very quickly.
Yeah. And never look back.
I'm down.
Like Lot's wife, don't look back or you'll turn to a pillar of salt. Yeah. I think Liverpool's probably like a PE of Britain.
I don't think you're wrong, actually. They're like super industrial in Liverpool, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah. Listen, Britain's not like a factory nation anymore, but yeah, Liverpool's right up there. All right.
So the Liverpudlians did well this weekend.
You said that already. Are you trying to make an emphasis
I just had to
of this point?
On the right syllable, yes. Arsenal also won this weekend, which makes Ben happy. They beat Brentford 1-0. But again, we need 6 more points and we won the league. So it doesn't really matter. Man City, they won 5-2 against Palace. Aston Villa beat Southampton 3-0. I know I touched on the UFC, but I got to go back to it because I was doing a Liverpool thing.
Yeah.
Volkanovski regained the vacant featherweight title by beating Diego Lopez by unanimous decision in 5 rounds. There was also rugby this weekend. The Bulls crashed out to Edinburgh in the EPCR Challenge Cup, 34-28 there after playing like absolute punts. What I think Ben meant to write there was something else.
I see.
But he did a pun.
He made a punny.
There you go. Leon Racing 92 and Bath, all through to the semis with Edinburgh, who beat the Bulls. And that is a sporting weekend.
Very good. Right, thank you, James. Manchester is a concrete hemorrhoid. The most exciting attraction they have is an agriculture museum, says Conrad Chris.
Concrete hemorrhoid.
It might be a terrible place, but back in the Middle Ages and early civilization, it was quite something. Not Liverpool, ever. And then Tutuko Flex, who is our producer here, says Arsenal did not win.
Wait, hang on.
Yeah, James, you idiot.
That's the sports report I got from Benjamin.
We have a dispute here. Flex, what are your sources?
No, he's right. He's right. It was 1-1.
So you know what? James doesn't check anything. He just gets the script and then reads it like a mongoloid. So thank you.
That's fair.
All
That's
right,
fair.
bye-bye. Bye-bye. How embarrassing, Leigh-Ann.
I'm more embarrassed for Ben.
Oh, you think it's Ben's fault?
Yes,
'Cause
absolutely.
He didn't check, and he's supposed to be an Arsenal fan.
Exactly. Maybe he just thought they'd win and wrote the sport early and went to bed.
So embarrassing. All right, so embarrassing. All right, a couple of things that we need to get to before we do Dr. Hanan. And why don't you check if he's ready for us and just let me know. So apparently there are 2 cases in South Africa that have blurred lines, depending on which side you're on. There's apparently, and this is quite something, a Gauteng mother who's been sentenced to 3 years imprisonment for murder of her son and daughter I mean, this is a hell of a story. And then the Eastern Cape Social Development MEC has decided not to charge the mom who killed the daughter's alleged rapist. So 2 big cases that are going on in South Africa right now that people are talking about.
Yeah. So in the first case, in Gauteng, it's a mother who tried to kill both her children and was successful in killing one. And you would think that is one of those absolute nutcase jobs where somebody's just lost it. However, she was so impoverished and was so desperate and couldn't support her children anymore. There was no one to look after them, and she was literally watching them starve. So to me, that does create a blurred line. Sure, as a very last resort, there must be something else that you can do. But that was just
that's heavy.
one of those that you could see both sides, right? And the other one,
Do you know, even if you rummage through the trash, you'd be able to find enough to feed your kid.
really?
Seriously, yeah, I'm telling you, I by no means am I saying that this is optimal. And obviously I have sympathy for anyone in this situation, but we live in a world where it's not like there's a famine. You know, there's no famine. It's not like those pictures you used to see in
it's
National
not like
Geographic.
locusts have eaten all of the
Yeah,
food.
where all the food has been destroyed by a plague of locusts, and then there's these kids with kwashiorkor's disease sitting there starving, and they're turning to skeletons with just the skin on them. I mean, you remember those pictures?
Yeah.
That's not happening. There are huge quantities of food that are thrown out every day. Our rubbish dumps are full of stuff that it may not be the best quality stuff, but it's still edible. And if you're starving, you'll find something to eat.
Yeah, but is it all about food? You're sleeping outside.
No. Listen, there are always aggravating factors.
Yeah.
But I don't think we live in a world in South Africa anymore where it's like you're starving because there's a famine, because there isn't any food around. You know, and frankly, I don't know anyone who wouldn't give someone money, help them with a meal, offer them something. There must be, you know, these food stores that throw out stuff that's expired by a day.
Yeah.
And it's and they give it to poor people and to indigent people. So I don't know whether this mom is just so far away from everything that she can't reach it, or what the excuse is. It's like, I think you could try a bit harder, because murdering your child is never the best possible outcome. I'm maybe barking up the wrong tree here, but there we go.
She escaped jail time, so she's got 3 years imprisonment.
Yeah.
Suspended. 8 years imprisonment. Wholly suspended for 5 years. And she had poisoned her children with rat poison. So doctors managed to save her 8-year-old daughter. The 16-year-old son succumbed. And
Horrible.
She eventually pled guilty, said pushed over the edge by financial and relationship problems. And then I know Dr. Hanan is on, but to just finish off, the other case is in the Eastern Cape. And that was a mom who rallied together with the organization, found the rapist of her daughter, who was raping her repeatedly, after they literally beat him to death. She was arrested, and she was released later on 500 Rand bail.
Good.
And the MEC is now saying, don't charge her.
I think so too.
Yeah, interesting cases though.
Yeah, I'm on her side. I mean, there's going to be a lot of noise and opinion about this. Let's go to Dr. Hanan. It's going to be okay. This is what we do on a Monday morning, and it is going to be okay. I mean, it's a short week, and before you know it, you can be in the weekend again. So, Doc, nice to see you, and I hope you had a good weekend. You hear us?
Now I can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. Sorry. I wasn't sure if you could hear us there. All right. So last time I dropped this into the conversation, I said we'd pick it up this week. And I'm sure that you are confronted by this far more regularly than I am. People are looking for ways to use AI to connect to stuff and AI can use everything that there is on the internet, the whole corpus of human knowledge and history, in order to ascertain, diagnose, and solve problems. Now, we use AI for everything. How useful is it in psychology?
So I'm a big fan and proponent of AI. AI is incredibly powerful. And as it becomes more advanced, it could really emulate human emotion and empathy. So especially over text, if you ever try to have a conversation, a human-like conversation with AI, as a psychologist, you'll see within 2 minutes, you forget that you're actually speaking to a computer algorithm, you forget that you're speaking to ones and zeros, and you really do think that you are speaking to a real human being.
Absolutely.
So an AI is just going to get better. It can trick you into believing that it has real empathy, and it's going to get to know you. The algorithm is going to get much stronger, much more efficient. It's going to get to know what pushes your buttons. It's going to get to know what gets you connected more. It's going to get to know you on a much more personal and intimate level. It's not going to forget things. And it's going to evolve as you evolve, and things that impact you, it will learn it. It will push your buttons. It will pull you in. It will engage you. It will draw you in. It will push you away with things that you don't like. It will gravitate or pull you in with things that you do. So it's going to get much better. But what it can't do is still, and I don't know if it will ever be able to do, is pick up on the small nuance of real human interaction. So the drawback of AI, which I find, listen, it's going to get much better, and it's going to be really good, and it's going to probably do a better job than maybe 95% of all therapists and even all doctors, and I don't know, in the human services field, it's going to overtake many, many professions. But what it can't do is pick up on the small nuance, perhaps non-traditional way of engaging with people. So for example, if right now you type into AI, hello, act as a therapist and I'm depressed, the first thing AI is going to do is going to draw on the collective knowledge, and it's going to say to you, I'm really sorry that you're feeling this way. Tell me more about it, which is kind of sounds like the right thing to say. But I can tell you, as a psychologist, sometimes when you get to know the person, the right thing to say is not to show empathy, but actually to show strength and go, first of all, what are you talking about when you say depression? And why would you be depressed when you have so much to be grateful for? So, but that only a human can do.
Right.
Because you get to know the person and you get to push back, and you don't rely on common traditional way of engaging with somebody. You rely perhaps on the way that your intuition is telling you to engage with that particular person, what that particular person needs right now. So AI might get there, but at the moment it's not there. So therefore the human interaction, the relationship, and the small nuance dynamics in conversations are still something that AI can't do, but humans can.
Michael John says, Doc, have you tried the new Grok app, specifically the not a therapist mode? It's amazing. So apparently that's part of Elon Musk's Grok app, which may be worth having a look at. There's an AI bot on ChatGPT Plus called Monday. It's a rude bot. It pushes your buttons to the core. I wanted to ask you about this because I put this up at the beginning of the show. Leigh-Ann wasn't here yet, but we saw this interesting graph about the uptick in suicide. And I don't want to have a depressing Monday, but clearly in South Africa, we've got a problem. A lot of young people talking about this. Leigh-Ann just sketched the scenario for two mothers and some very, very difficult decisions they've had to make. And obviously, privation is not as bad now as it used to be back in the day. People live much better now. Even very, very poor people live much better now than at any other stage in our history. But we still have this rapid and very, very concerning trend, particularly among young men, but across the board, of suicide. So we've got to touch on that at some point if it's such a big issue that Discovery say it is the second leading cause of unnatural deaths. I mean, look at that chart. You got motor vehicle accidents, suicide, trauma, crime, and other accidents. We talk nonstop about crime. We talk nonstop about accidents. We talk nonstop about trauma. But suicide seems to be the biggest category there. And how many people talk about that, Doc?
Yeah, I mean, look at this. It's 23% for motor vehicle accidents, and
Yeah.
I think it was said 35% for suicide.
Yeah.
I mean,
Suicide's way bigger.
It's insane. It's insane. And therapy seems to be doing the same thing. And, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And therapy has been doing the same thing for 150 years. And we wonder why suicide and depression, anxiety, and overall mental ill health is getting progressively worse. Maybe we need to change the model. And we could do an 8-hour workshop on the show on what I believe the old model doesn't cover. And we need to think about mental health in a completely different way. But there's so much resistance against change. You know, the human brain doesn't like to change. It likes to keep on repeating patterns because metabolically it's very cheap to keep on just going back on autopilot. But we got to do things differently. And, you know, I've said this many times, I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl.
Yeah.
And Viktor Frankl in the 1940s did a lecture, and you should actually go and Google it. And the stuff that he says in 1940 still applies almost 100 years later. He says back then the youth lacked purpose. They lacked something to chase that is of meaning to them. And now if you read his lectures today and assume that he's talking to the audience today, you'd actually think that he's talking to the youth in 2025. People lack purpose. People lack agency. People wake up and have nothing meaningful to do. So if you had to do a poll for your audience, ask people how many people actually have a sense of purpose. And I'm not talking about a job, because you can work anywhere. And by the way, a lot of people don't have a job, but even for those that do have a job, how many feel this is my life's mission? This resonates with my spirit. So the reason why people are feeling stuck is because one of the major reasons is because they're not waking up and having anything of meaning to do, anything of meaningfulness to do. They're not chasing things that resonate with who they are. So that's a big cause, and we've got to address that if you want to address depression, anxiety, and suicide and mental ill health.
Yeah, I think here's an interesting point that's being raised by Carl. He says suicide isn't talked about very much because the people who are affected the most lose the ability to speak when they succumb to the illness. I mean, that's kind of a crude way of saying, that it isn't spoken about because the main protagonist is gone.
Right, but I can tell you unfortunately, I've seen so many depressed people, and I can tell you what is the number one cause of suicide. Obviously, the reason why people commit suicide is because the pain and suffering of the life that they lead is superseded by the fantasy or the potential good of letting go of that suffering. So in other words, death is more appealing than living. So we got to create a much more meaningful, purposeful existence so that death doesn't even become an option. Listen, does everybody fantasize about, I wonder what life would be like if I just left or I just went away? Everybody at some point goes through a low moment where you question the meaning of your life. But suicide is another level where you actually take action against the suffering that you experience on a daily basis. It's a very, very, very serious condition. But again, I call it a condition. The truth is, I don't want you to think that suicide or depression is something that you have and you need to carry it like being a diabetic for the rest of your life. The truth is, you can do something about it. You must have agency, and you must. And if you can't deal with it, then you got to find somebody to help pull you through it.
I think that's so important. And the things you can do something about, you must. But also there are things that you can't do anything about. I mean, there's no point in contemplating suicide because the rand isn't doing so well against the dollar, or because, our exports have to remain competitive. There's no reason for someone to even consider suicide on those sorts of bases, because you can't do anything about those things. What you can do is the stuff that you have control over in your life. And I think that sense of a loss of control is probably the most important reason that people plunge into despair. I mean, we don't have that problem with so many people in our audience, but Congo Chris says people need to learn to be ornery and bitter again. I exist out of pure spite, he says. So that gives him a reason to exist. Dirk says the only animal that commits suicide are humans. Other animals don't do that. I suppose you could argue lemmings do, right? Lemmings jump over but they don't know that they just, it's like crowd madness.
Yeah.
My anxiety feels like a heavy load I carry around all the time, a monster from the future coming to get me. It's not fun. How do you respond to that, Doc?
Well, a big part of mental ill health that human beings share but don't share with animals is the ability to project forward and the ability to reflect back. And that is and not, to your point, Gareth, not live in the moment with something that you can't control. Animals just live with the information, with the ones and zeros that they have in front of them. So they make decisions and they use that data to make the next decision. And they use that data to make the next decision, which is incredibly helpful. Human beings, and by the way, the reason why we survived is because we're able to project forward and we're able to reflect back, which is an incredible, useful, let's call it tool and gift that allows us to, well, again, prepare for what's coming and learn from the mistakes that we have made in the past. But that doesn't serve us all the time, because when you look backwards, you feel a sense of regret or shame or guilt. I should have, I could have, I didn't. And therefore that leads to depression. And when you project forward with things that you can't control, well, obviously the rand is going to go to X, Y, and Z. Obviously the housing market is this. Obviously Trump is that. So you're able to project forward to a doom and gloom, which actually creates a sense of anxiety, because what are you going to do about it? So the thing that has saved us and the thing that has put us on the top of the food chain is the thing that's causing this incredible mental ill health that we need to work through.
A lot to swallow in that little bit of info and that bit of advice. So thank you. We will catch up with you in another couple of days. We're not going to see you next Monday because it's a holiday, but we'll see you the week after that.
Happy Easter, guys.
Thanks, Doc. There's Dr. Hanan.
Okay.
Yeah, there are a lot of holidays and things happening in the next few days. It's going to be very difficult to even keep track. So make sure when you wake up, or make sure when you set your alarm the night before, that you actually have to be up the next day.
Cancel those early alarms.
Oh, that's going to be so nice.
Yeah.
Thursday night. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment or two. Don't go anywhere. Leigh-Ann and I here. Got Chris Hart popping in a little bit later on, talk about all things to do with the economy.
The seasons are changing, and with that, the team assembles in a chillier than usual studio this week at the TRN headquarters. Professional golfer Rupert Kaminsky is our special guest this week. His boyish good looks aside, he's here because it's Masters Week, and it's our first full swing at a golf episode so far. Given the choice between a weekend of passion with 2005 Scarlett Johansson or a chance to attend the Masters in Augusta, Ben has on record stated that this is a stupid question, and the answer is an obvious one. Find out why he feels this way here, and what is it that makes this event and this week so incredible. Plus, we get a deeper view into the world of professional golf with Rupert too. It's episode 43 of the On The Bounce Show. Let's get into it.
Freestyle, right? So
you're kissing, you're doing
you're kissing this girl, whatever, you fall into the bed, whatever. And it was like so awkward for the female actors, for the actresses, because
niggas will get hard on.
Yeah, and also niggas take advantage.
Niggas, that's what I'm saying, dog.
You're kissing this girl, you're swallowing her whole face. You know what I mean?
Take
like,
one.
It's
getting carried away. You're getting into it.
Carried away. Fast forward to today.
Intimacy.
There's intimacy coaches.
Where's the flavor?
So it's literally like there's an intimacy coach.
It's
like a choreographer. So now it's like, it's literally like, where are you comfortable me touching you? Can I touch you here? Yes. Can I touch you? Yes. No.
Nice.
I can't touch me there. What's the? You ask first. Can I step into your space? Yes.
Sure.
Can I step into
what?
Space?
Yeah.
And there's
professional.
Very professional.
I guess that safeguards everyone.
Yeah. And also, it's not necessarily Guti, it's a Metaya Mantombazani wwho are also violated. Because Natis are my snake. You are
come on.
Talk your player. Talk your No, it is what it is. So now we need protection. Protect us, please. Director.
Please.
Ladies coming too hard for me.
Oh my God.
When I'm young in season.
Don't I look fantastic with a wig? Huh? That's me. A la, 17th century powdered wigs. And
Yes.
I really think I could get away with walking around looking like that all the time.
Yeah,
Don't you?
You could pull it off.
Yeah. And look how grumpy I look.
It's perfect.
It's perfect for me. I love it. All right. Speaking of grumpy, James, I just sent you this picture now. You can pop it up when you get a chance. Prancer, a 13-pound gremlin chihuahua who hates men and children and was described as a vessel for a traumatized Victorian child, has been adopted by a 36-year-old single lesbian in Connecticut in the United States. So Prancer.
Well, they'd have to be a lesbian woman because
he hates men and children. Yeah. So that's Prancer, the gremlin chihuahua. And you must see this thing's facial expression. You think I'm grumpy in a wig. You have no idea. Prancer is something else.
Yeah, chihuahuas.
They're horrible little things, hey?
There are not many nice chihuahuas, nice to other people.
They're not. They're very cross
Very
little dogs.
protective of their owners. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you looked like that, wouldn't you be cross? So the big stories this week, and we'll get into this with Chris Hart, no doubt, because the world economy is focused on Trump's trade war at the moment. And some people think he's a genius, and some people think he's a complete idiot.
Yeah.
The Chinese are very stuck at the moment because what he seems to be trying to do is to isolate them. The Chinese economy will not survive being cut off from America.
Says who?
Well, this is what economists are saying. And most of the people who understand this stuff much better than I do, and who I'm gleaning this information from on the internet. You know, voices that I respect. We'll find out from Chris Hart what he thinks, because he is one of the voices I respect when he comes in later. But China is where most of the world's stuff is made. So I kind of like where we're at as a country. We can be friends with America and we can be friends with China.
Listen, China is, as we speak, reaching out to us, offering us real iPhones, real products that are made perfectly well, and because they're made for the US market, and saying, well, look, here's a truck full.
So if we can't sell them to America, we'll sell them to you.
They are not acting out of fear, which makes me think they may be right. I think it was the trade minister of China was interviewed on an Australian news network. And he said, if the US thinks that they can put a dent in our economy, it's laughable. We can regain that 15% very easily elsewhere. We are not afraid, and he must do it, because we need to prove a point now. There's no fear, that even right down to just members of the public watching their activity on social media, the way they're coming out and mocking this whole thing. At any point, you can go on to, because I'm now in it, it's on my feed.
Who knew we'd be talking about
Chinese
tariffs?
Manufacturers coming directly. Hey, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, come and, make a deal with my factory.
Yeah, but okay, so here's the problem. There are a number of different ways we can take this conversation. First, let's look at how it affects us, okay? Because I think that's what matters to most South Africans. It's like, how does it, if I order stuff from China, is it going to affect me? Probably not. I mean, we've already got tariffs and taxes and charges in place. That's why when you buy things from Alibaba or from Temu or from Shein, you will be charged a customs and tax on its way in, right?
Yeah.
And that you have to pay to our government. That's not because we've got a tariff agreement with China. That's because our government want their slice of the pie, even though they're not entitled to any of it. If you ask me, they still want some, because they've got to make their money somewhere. They're not capable of making it legitimately, so they have to just take some of yours. So that's not going to change from what I can tell. If you're in America, though, and you were ordering on Temu last week, and now you're going to do it in a couple of weeks' time, I believe there's a freeze that's been put on by Trump on these tariffs for a little while, 90 days or something. But you'll find at the end of that period a whole lot more expense.
But
it's going to cost you a lot more, twice as much.
That's a minute scale on a minute scale is people ordering stuff. The big thing is manufacturing. So, for instance, if you take designer handbags, like a Gucci handbag or whatever, China makes those, and they send them to the US, or if it's a French brand, they'll send it to Europe, where the final step is for the company in either the US or Europe, to put on the logo and package it. They do not know how to make those bags. They don't have the leathers. They don't have the studs, the patterns. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the artisans who hand sew those things. And I don't think that they realize that there are entire cities bigger than San Francisco, which produce only one type of product. And that they've been building this up for 15 years to be in this position.
Oh, yeah.
And Trump is of the opinion that they're going to come begging and say, we'll set up our factory in America. There's no ways they're giving up their billion-dollar position.
There could be a number of other factors at play here as well. I mean, America does have the lion's share of world trade going in and out. They can determine the price of things. And I think it would be interesting also to consider that for some people, it's not just about trade. This is about currency and playing with currencies, currency inflation. It could have to do with the trade deficit, the surplus that some countries have over others. We'll talk to Chris Hart about all of these. I think he'll be an interesting man to ask about it. But Donald Trump is definitely playing a hell of a high-stakes game here, because we're also talking about Vietnam, Japan. I see the EU making all sorts of overtures already. So there are a number of countries that have been brought to the bargaining table, which this was not the case a couple of days ago. And it's classic Trump if you consider the art of the deal and the way that he usually does this. You take up an extreme position and then you work back from that. And the only way to get people to the bargaining table sometimes is to say to them, we're going to blow the whole thing up if you don't. And then
it's definitely his tactic, but he is coming across now more than ever as looking a bit foolish.
We'll see. We'll see. The proof will be in the pudding. All right. So Chris Hart is a South African economist and investment strategist known for his candid commentary on economic and political issues. He began his career as a science teacher before transitioning into finance. He works as a senior financial economist at Absa Capital and later as the chief strategist at Investment Solutions, which is a subsidiary of Alexander Forbes. And I'm very, very pleased to see him. Chris, it's so good to see you and have you here in the studio with us.
Thank you very much, Gareth.
Yeah, and Leigh-Ann and I are excited to talk to you about China and trade wars and tariffs and all of that stuff. But I do have to just reflect on something that a couple of years ago, you were one of the first people that they tried to cancel on social media.
Yes,
because of your opinions.
Yes.
I remember that well. You survived. Well done. You're still here. Most of them are still living in their parents' basements. Yes.
Something like that,
Yeah.
yes. As I've since transitioned into impact investing.
Yes.
And that's the main thing, is to see if one can actually try and transition. It's one of the problems we have in South Africa, is that the absent part of our financial services sector is, in fact, and I say absent, is really access to capital for SMEs.
Right. Okay, so is that what impact in investment is all about?
No, if you go to Europe, it's pretty woke. Now that you're worried about the plastic straw and that kind of thing. But
environmental sustainability. What is it? ESG, environmentally sustainability and
social
governance.
Social and governance. Yeah.
What a lot of crap.
So to my mind, I look at it. Impact investing. If you're going to do that here in Africa, it's got to be Africa relevant. Food, jobs, housing,
energy.
Not even green energy, just energy.
Any energy.
And but we also have another factor called business ownership. In other words, we try and look to see if you can structure things where you fund people into their businesses and not out of their businesses.
Right.
Because that's the big problem with, if you could say, the normal venture capital private equity thing, is that we'd love your idea, we'll fund it, but we'll take 70% of your business or something like that.
Right.
And so you've got to try and see how can you actually fund people into their businesses as a whole thing. But
Okay,
yeah,
so let's start with South Africa. We'll get to China eventually. I know Leigh-Ann is she's actually quite enthusiastic about this. I never thought the day would come, Leigh-Ann, where you and I would sit and talk about Chinese and American tariffs.
Yeah, you see, TikTok's an amazing place. It's made it very interesting.
I may just throw a word of caution in there and say, if TikTok is your source for all of this, you're going to find a very biased algorithm in favor of China. But let's just turn our attention. We've got Chris here, and it's a rare thing to talk about economics and to talk about how things affect South Africans. So let's just start with this, Chris. I mean, everybody is all bent out of shape, screaming at each other. Potentially the government and national unity is going to fall apart. Tell me about this VAT hike and give me a little bit of perspective on this. How important is a 0.5% increase in VAT? How hard does it affect the average South African? Do we need to have a 0.5% tax increase? And what's the government trying to do?
So in my view, it's one of these, you do things at the edge. You keep incrementally increasing your burden, right? And I think one of the things we need to get terminology right. We often speak about tax revenue, and I really believe you need to talk about the tax take, because revenue has an implication that it's earned. Okay,
they haven't earned it.
Whereas they're
just taking it from you at the barrel of a gun.
And we need to use the term the burden of government, as opposed to government services. We really do need to speak about that. More. Just to set the thing, because what has happened is that our government has a very socialist Keynesian type of view on how you generate growth, and it's a spending model, but they want to spend it. Okay, so they don't believe that the private sector should have resources. They earn the money to their purpose in life is to actually pay taxes. And you often hear a narrative, speaking about that, if you do this, there'll be more tax revenue. That's not my purpose in life, is to generate more tax take for the government. So we need to actually say there's a certain perspective that government needs to be put in place. But over the last, particularly since 2007, it's been, it was a pivotal change, but in fact, it's been going on since before then, that the government has continued to increase their burden, right? And the overall share of the economy, if you like, that they actually take, it's now well into the 30s. It's very, very high.
So this
30%.
This socialist Keynesian way of understanding the world, it clearly hasn't worked for some 15, 20 years, and yet they persist with it.
Well, I think let's go back to the 30s and Keynes and Kahn. How do you get out of the depression, and how do you calculate GDP? If private sector spends a rand, it gets added to GDP. If government spends a rand, it gets added to GDP. So it doesn't matter who's spending as long as that's going up. But the problem was with consumption-led growth is it's also debt-led growth.
Right.
And we can see that. And it leads to these huge cyclical swings and roundabout. If you have investment-led growth, in other words, where you've got the structural capacity of the economy is growing faster than the demand, or keeping up with the demand of the economy, you don't get inflation, firstly. You saw that with Asian tiger growth, for instance, because it's not that you've got a factory that you've reached the capacity and you then have to raise interest rates to cool the economy down. You've built another factory and you've built more and more supply along with that that rising demand. And you can sustain very, very high growth rates if you have investment-led growth. The other big difference is if it's consumption-led growth, right, it's the multipliers in the economy is not nearly as high as investment-driven growth, because consumption, you buy a chocolate, you eat it, that's the end of it, right? Whereas if you buy a chocolate factory, it's something that endures, and creates multipliers, much more effectively over the longer period of time. In South Africa, the solution to South Africa's problem is not what we see and what exists. It's what needs to come into existence. The economy is too small, right, for the people in the economy. So we need to buy more economy. Now, when you say buy more economy, that's the other word we use is invest. All right, but you have to buy more factories, you have to buy more infrastructure, you can take everything in South Africa, you can look around and you can double it up. Right. And that's what we need to do.
Is it possible to do that? Are there countries that are getting that right?
Well, let's put it this way. If you do the calculations, South Africa from 94 to 2007, and I'll tell you why 2007 is quite critical, we underperformed the average. Right. Remember, it's not better than average. In other words, it's what is easily achievable. I've often said if we only could achieve mediocre, we'd be doing so much better.
Yeah, we have aspirations to mediocrity in this country.
No, we don't. If we can achieve mediocre, because we've underperformed the average sub-Saharan Africa and emerging market average growth by 1.5 percentage points from 94 to 2007. Then 2007 came another pivotal point, which was the dropping of the charges against Zuma. That's the breaking down of law and order, giving politicians impunity and shifting corruption from skimming to plunder. Right from that point of
that's what you believe happened there.
Well, that was when they dropped the charges against Zuma. That was a critical thing. But you can see it was a switch in the economy, hidden by the global financial crisis at the time. But what happened is that from that point till now, we've had an additional 2 percentage points underperformance. So we're underperforming emerging markets in sub-Saharan Africa by about 3.5 percentage points a year. And you compound that from 94 till the present, we would have an economy almost 3 times the size of what it is now, with unemployment below 8%. But that is the cost of what we call Muppet economics, okay, that has the spending mindset rather than an investment mindset. All right. And when I look at the comment, everybody has a growth budget. They all say growth, but they're actually not talking about growth, because the moment you say growth, my ears are listening. I'm saying, you want a growth budget? I now want to hear savings. That's the capital. What are you doing to boost savings and translating that into investment in the economy? Those are the 2 factors. You can always add other factors. You can have investment and technology. You can have investment and education. You can have but you've got to have investment.
So what tools does the finance minister actually have at his disposal?
Huge.
Because
massive.
All right, before we get into that, even we often expect like someone will come in and do everything.
Yeah.
Is that person the finance minister? You say he's got massive tools at his disposal. What kinds of things could he do as opposed to raising VAT by 0.5%?
Yeah, well, the first thing is he should be the first principle in tax. And remember, it's accountants and lawyers that determine the tax. Well, they don't always understand the economic implication of a tax. But I would step back and say, if you take a value chain, try and tax the end of the value chain and not milk the value chain, because you want the multipliers to run. Okay, you can't say we want beneficiation, but crush it at source with taxes, right? You've got to actually say, well, let's see that if you do this at the next step, there's a tax break. If you don't do it, you're going to incur tax, because that's the end of the value chain. So try and do that. The second thing is, no emerging market in the world can justify wealth taxes, and we've got at least 3 horrible wealth taxes which damage the ability of the economy to accumulate capital.
What are those?
Capital gains tax.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's like eating seeds and wondering why you're not getting harvests. The second thing is wealth taxes.
Well, you've already been taxed on the money that they're going to tax you on again.
Well,
I mean, like if you sell a property, for example, or you sell your shares in a business.
That's property transfer tax.
No, but that's another one.
That's another one. Okay, and then rates and taxes is that, and death duties. Those are all wealth taxes where the government takes it and converts it into consumption. It is stupid. Even if it wasn't taxed, You don't want it. And I know accountants say, but if you don't tax capital gains, people will shift income into capital. So that's exactly the behavior we want.
Yeah.
Exactly the behavior. We want
Right.
as much capital as possible, because we need to get just to start eating slowly into the unemployment rate. We need an investment rate of about 25% of GDP. Ideally, it should be above 30%. At the moment, it's sitting at 15. All right. It's barely enough to cover depreciation. All right. And then we've had another huge efforts, a huge measure that's been taken now, and that's expropriation without compensation. And that is going to give the additional underperformance of the economy. But I don't know how much, but we will only see the damage, right, in a decade, right, when we actually see the difference and you've got enough data, because that's the problem with economics. You're looking in the rearview mirror and you have to have a look at data. But the first big shoe to fall that damaged the economy that was hidden was we can see it in the mining industry. The mining industry went ex-growth in 2001 on a specific day. On a specific day, it went from where people were investing to no growth beyond that.
What changed?
They threw the mining charter, the BE mining charter, into the industry. All right. And from that moment, all South African assets, mining assets in your global houses like BHP, Billiton, even Anglo, which is South African one, Rio Tinto, they actually shed South African assets. They're not interested in South African assets from then.
Well, who would be? You have to give someone who's done nothing in the business, who doesn't earn anything, is not paying money for their shares. But you have to give them a whole huge percentage of your business just because they're connected to someone in government.
So you give it away, they sell it, so you've got to do it again.
Yeah.
You know, etc. And it's not anybody.
It's got to be a cadre.
Yeah, it's the list is given to you. You can't just do something, you know, for general. And the problem with that is that these are laws that nobody else applies anywhere else in the world.
No.
You know, we'll discuss it in South Africa.
They would be laughed at in any other country.
We discuss it, and it's quite surreal because our mindset is we're going to deal with the legacy of apartheid. But I believe what they implemented was a policy of economic transfer rather than a policy of growth. So if you go back a century and go back to, you know, post-Anglo-Boer War, etc., Afrikaans community is devastated that we've now got the Union of South Africa, and we have a sort of affirmative action there. But the Afrikaners see there's Old Mutual, we set up Sanlam.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't say there's Old Mutual, we'll take it, thank you very much. They saw Standard Bank, we'll set up Volkskas, and etc. So it was a policy of economic growth. One can argue, you know, is it ideal, and it's maybe suboptimal, but there's an intervention that actually added to the economy rather than, you know.
This is parasitizing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the problem being too small. If we go, you know, very often we love to chat about percentages, right, and how unfair things are when we're talking about percentages. This is how futile things like the redress project policies are.
Mm-hmm.
Is if we take the number of people employed in South Africa, it's about 16 million. The number of people who need jobs is about 12 to 14 million. All right. The unemployment rate amongst whites is about 9-10%. Amongst blacks, much higher.
Why is that?
Well, let's go away from the percentages, because that's the point I'm trying to make.
Mm-hmm.
Is that if we had no affirmative action policies at all, and we then got investment in and we generated 5 million jobs, but it's the bad old days of apartheid. The first jobs that we create go to whites and the rest go to black. How many white people are unemployed? It's 100,000.
Really?
So if you create 5 million jobs, it can only be blacks. There are no other people to do. So what's the point of the affirmative action?
Well, it's actually just, I mean, it's very small-minded. The cake is only so big, so we're going to keep cutting into ever smaller pieces.
It's a socialist mindset of that this is the cake, and we've got to deal with the cake as it is.
Right, and we'll apportion this because the state will decide who gets what. Yeah. I mean, it's a terrible system, and I can't believe that in the last 15 years, someone hasn't woken up and gone, hang on, we're on the wrong track here.
Even on the employment numbers, if you say, okay, let's remove all whites out of the economy and replace them with blacks. You're taking 2 million whites out of the economy, replacing them with blacks, and your black unemployment rate will still be the need for 12 million jobs instead of 14 million jobs. In other words,
but it's easy to focus on this is scapegoating, and let's do that. You know, it's the Jews, or it's the whites, or it's the Indians, or whatever.
The point is, when it comes to growth and entrepreneurship, etc., it's all hands on deck.
Yeah,
we have to.
Okay, so I want to just move from us and this VAT thing, because I do think that that's kind of small-minded and boring.
Yeah, so the VAT was not necessary because we need to be shifting to investment, not consumption. It doesn't make a difference on the margin, but it's additional growth. So if you now say, is this a growth budget? No, it isn't, because you're shifting resources to the government, which is lower multiplier expenditure because they don't have a commercial reason to spend the money compared to private sector, and you're shifting it to consumption rather than investment.
Do we have any idea of how much
anti-growth?
Do we have any idea of how much has been stolen through corruption, and how much money this economy has lost to just very grey things that we don't even know about, and then suddenly Eskom, can't buy coal, or suddenly we owe, our deficit is growing at this rate a year? Or
it's difficult, but very often the Auditor General will come in and say, okay, at Eskom there was 20 billion rand of wasteful, fruitless expenditure, for instance. Okay, and that's very much an auditor role because there's a paper trail and that sort of thing. But that also helps anchor our mind that it's like 20 billion, 3 billion. It's not 800-900 billion or even a trillion.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a grip on that overall number.
What then happens is that Eskom, here's Eskom Power Station, and here's a mine, let's say, owned by Anglo, and they provide the coal to thing. But now that's not allowed. Right, you've got to now pass it through an intermediary. Okay?
A BEE intermediary.
So Anglo still sells their coal, call it 100 rand a ton, all right, and the intermediary then sells it not at 110, but like 400-500 rand a ton.
Wow, big margins.
It's a huge amount. So in the auditor, there's the paper, there the things balance, etc., and there's the invoice, there's the contract, and it passes the accounting.
Is that the kind of markup that these middlemen put in there?
Well, I've been told that the markups can be quite astonishing, and then you also have a factor where the truck will arrive, all right, full, measured, etc., and it'll leave full, and then arrive back, all right, before they actually do it. So it can sometimes, that's just gate.
What's the same truck?
It's the same truck with the same coal, etc., but it's
being counted twice.
It's coming in, and how do you know there's a whole pile of coal, etc.? But
all right, so let's talk about what everybody's interested in at the moment, because I think we'll talk about your book too. I know for people who are interested in BRICS, I think it's really important that we refer to this, because we're part of this, for better or worse, BRICS alliance with Brazil and Russia and India and China, and we're the minnow in that arrangement, but we have a role to play. So let's get to that just now. First, let's talk about Trump and America and the global trade war and the tariffs going up everywhere. What do you think is happening here? Use your much more trained eye to give us a little insight.
I'm going to start with the simplicity. Okay. When we export to Europe or the US, we open factories. When we export to China, we close factories.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I understand the sentiment that China's built up these things, but there's an increasing resentment, not just in America, but in the world, that China would insist that if you're going to produce to their market, you've got to actually produce in China, and the Communist Party wants half your shares of the
parasitic government.
And the reason you would climb those walls, those barriers, is because of the deep potential that you have in China. Right? We look at it and we will copy China, but there isn't the same deep potential behind these walls. So America's saying we're done with this. We want to actually have a fairer trade thing. So it's not. They are then saying we'll put reciprocal trade tariffs on. Okay, so if you charge us 60%, we're going to charge you 30%. That's not completely reciprocal, but it sharpens the mind to say, what kind of deal do you want with the US? Right? If you want to actually still continue to export at zero tariffs, reciprocate with zero tariffs.
That's the ideal, right? Is that we all end up with zero tariffs, because then we can have proper free trade.
Exactly. So it's not the same as the 30s where everybody put barriers up. Right? It's actually breaking them down, but it's the threat of higher barriers that are bringing people to the
so then Trump is playing a game of 4D chess, and
yes,
we may be underestimating him. I mean, he has famously said things like his mojo is deal making. That's what he loves. That's what he wants to do. And do you think that it is possible for him to get the kind of deals done with the countries surrounding China in the Pacific, and also the countries that are China's major trading partners, where they can assert themselves, this is the Americans now, as the global hegemon that they believe they are, and where they can actually open up trade rather than let it become more closed?
Yeah, so you're already getting countries like Vietnam, etc., that say, we'll have a zero trade deal with you, because what's going to happen, remember, it's global multinationals. They've chosen to set up their factories in China. They may say, okay, I'm going to set it up in Vietnam. Okay, and then enjoy that reciprocity, because Vietnam has certain advantages, lower wages or whatever the case is, and they can actually, they are actually able to compete, right? And we've got to actually look at it in the same way. And the advantages to South Africa is that we're forced to look at our competitiveness. We can't put our own moat around here and, say neocolonialism and whatever epithet you want to actually strip. We need adults in the room to actually say, in this kind of world, okay, we actually have to rise to the point beyond mediocre, but to actually become excellent, which will be a good thing for South Africa. If we choose to say, okay, we're just going to throw a lot in with China, etc., America's going to maybe deal with us in a different way. And I know my own mind is that they may say, let's support Cape exit.
Yeah.
All right.
Or something
so you
else.
can imagine, how are we going to defend against Cape? If they park their aircraft carrier off Cape Town, and the Navy sends their rowing boat with one broken oar out to meet
by the way,
threat.
Jan van Riebeeck had more working ships than our current Navy do. Do you know that? Jan van Riebeeck had 3 ships when he arrived in the Cape in 1652. We currently have 2 working ships in our Navy.
Yes.
If that isn't embarrassing, I don't know what is.
Well,
anyway, so you're thinking that America, they have the might to be able to get involved in ways that we don't even know yet.
Exactly.
And even if it's just by sheer economic power, we need them more than they need us.
Well, I'll go back to this again. The simplicity is that our relationship with the US is that they're happy and they're open. They're a consumer society. They will take manufactured goods, in other words, goods with lots of value add, right, including finished cars, right? They will take that, right? Whereas China doesn't. They block it. Okay, they'll take our raw materials with pleasure, right, and send, with that, and I think you'll find, for instance, the European Union say we're going to resist this, etc., but they will have to do a deal with the US because that's their more valuable trading partner.
Sure.
But they're not going to say, well, then we'll actually allow China to hemorrhage, right, our industry, through the back door. They're going to do something similar. So it might well be China is playing the tough man because of their internal politics. But the problem with that China faces is that their internal system is extremely leveraged, maybe over-leveraged.
Yeah.
And that requires growth at the margin. So even if you say, okay, well, US trade, China's exports to the US is only like 3% of Chinese GDP, that 3% is at the margin.
Yeah.
Right. In a very leveraged system.
And their system is so like a house of cards because
well, that's
they've
the house
got
of
to
cards,
have
yes.
they've got to have growth because
Yes.
their population is at such an enormous the population dynamics are at such fractious and dangerous numbers.
Exactly.
And the economy has to keep up with that, or else you end up with a major, major problem.
Yes.
And the Chinese government don't need instability. And the only way to secure themselves against instability is to keep growth going. So they also have internal pressures that we mustn't consider to be unimportant. Let me just ask you, because you wrote this book, you co-authored a book on BRICS called BRICS Halfway There.
Yes.
Is BRICS really a going concern at the moment? How seriously should we take it? How seriously do you think the Americans, particularly the new administration in Washington, thinks BRICS is? And tell us where the role of this alliance that we're cobbled into with Brazil and Russia and India and China will take us.
I see when it was just the 5 BRICS, 5 countries, it was a fairly disparate group of countries. With their own internal rivalries. Russia, India, China China's got disputes with both Russia and China. And they're not easy disputes. So it's not a natural thing. But what is happening with China actually now, I'll use the term Japanification of China. In other words, that they may well go into a period of a decade of stagnation as they try and actually unwind some of the excesses that they've built. It doesn't mean a lot of what's there's not real, right? But there's also a lot that is is bubble-like. Like Japan got it, it took them 3 decades, and they're still battling with the excesses of that huge bubble that they had at the end of the 1980s, and their stock exchange. So you may well find that China goes into stagnation and India increasingly takes a bigger lead. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is that the Indian growth is a lot more solid, all right, and it's less state-driven because their deep socialism is receding, but their population may well be significantly more than China. In other words, it's recently, on the official numbers, eclipsed. Both of them have got, 1.4 billion people and some change with, the Indian change a little bit more than the Chinese, apparently. But there may well be a population gap of about, on the numbers of a few hundred million.
It's a lot of people.
It is quite a lot of people.
It's substantial. It's like double our total population if they just undercalculate by 100 million, right?
Yeah. Our population's a rounding error, compared to that. And their rounding error, may well be, 3 or 4 times the size of our population. But the point is that it's a very difficult. They are in a very difficult position as the dynamic goes. But in terms of BRICS, it does look like it's now they're trying to find purpose. I've often said, is this it's a politically driven thing? In other words, it's not necessarily driven by economics. It's not like the European Union where you've got at least some cultural consistency, if you like, across the region. But I think it looks like it was transforming, and it is transforming into what was in the Cold War, the non-aligned movement, which is not really that non-aligned, all right, but really seeking there as some sort of organization against the West, right? And India is there, and they're not necessarily against the West. They're actually conducting...
big buddy with Trump at the moment.
Well, India has a very self-assertive foreign policy. They say we will do what's good for India.
Yeah, and pragmatic.
I don't care about your issue with Russia. It's not our issue with Russia. We will trade with Russia. I don't care about, so, and India is now big enough for people to, tiptoe around. Their military is in fact very, very powerful, right? It's not just a ragtag third world sort of thing. It's actually quite a modern, efficient, with quite a lot of capacity, right? In terms of aircraft, nuclear power, they've got satellites. It's not, that
they've had to with Pakistan on their border, and there's been an ongoing dispute there for years.
And it'll continue. But Pakistan is now falling back in this race more and more, and they can't keep up. But I think the problem is the religious order is shifting more and more radical, and it's becoming a lot more difficult to manage and engage with the world.
Okay, so BRICS, we don't really derive that much of a benefit from it as it is at the moment. Is there any reason other than South Africa giving a middle finger to the West because maybe we don't like Donald Trump, or we think that he's focused on the wrong issues here, or he's talking about Afrikaners or farm murders, and we don't like that? Do we stay in BRICS just to piss the Americans off? Is this going to get us any benefit from China, Russia, India? Are we part of something that could give rise to an alternate global currency which is used more than the dollar?
I think.
Or would they come to our rescue?
Would they?
No, would they?
If the US...
Because I can see a situation where China or India make a deal with the US and we end up sucking the hind tit again.
Yeah, I think what's the issues that, when it comes to global trade choke points, etc., I think what the Trump is doing, they're saying Panama, Greenland, etc., we want to actually secure trade routes. And they think a lot more global in that basis. China will be thinking Singapore Strait, etc., pretty much, and the Taiwan Strait. Let's see if we can, secure that kind of thing. If something happens here, I don't think they'll step in. They don't have the ability to project their power like the US can. Right? Again, the Chinese can send their 3 aircraft carriers, and America will send their, 30 or
yeah, sure.
It's just no match,
right,
at this stage. So certainly they cannot project that power. And I think,
in any case, they've always been much more soft power than hard power.
Yes.
And they think long term in China.
Exactly. But when you're now looking at what happened in the Suez Canal, the Cape Sea route becomes a lot more strategic, right? And I think Trump is interested in that. I don't think Trump is the factor, right? I think in the DNA of the ANC, they are anti-West.
Yeah.
Right. In other words, when Biden was there, they were anti-West. In other words, they were pissing off the Americans, Democrat and Republican, already well before. The Trump is just pushing the needle and touching the boil, and our response was typically puerile, instead of actually trying to understand and say, how do we respond to this in a sensible way that goes, neocolonialism, racist, all of that kind of
same old hymn book
stuff. And that's not interesting to them. That's, oh, really? Right. Well, let's look at other measures.
So when they talk about things that America could do to make our lives a lot more difficult, There are obviously a lot of those. There could be a discussion, and I don't really need to get into any detail on this with you because there are more important things to discuss. But if the US decided to sanction ANC leaders, for example, how does that actually affect their wallet?
Well, I think the first thing we need to start with is America have imposed no sanctions at all. There are no sanctions. It's just that they've withdrawn aid,
which already is hurting us.
And that's the thing. A lot of the programs say, "Look what we're doing for AIDS." Actually, the Americans are doing it. And that's being exposed, quite a bit. So it starts to become extremely awkward, right? Because if they're now going into transactions, you can look at your credit card, debit cards, etc. It's got either Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. Those are all American platforms, SWIFT, etc. There's all sorts of things. Now, the BRICS, you could say China, Russia, etc., creating alternative platforms, that's fine, but the best quality of our trade is with the West, right? And our economy will struggle, right? And from an electoral point of view, the ANC is already reaping the rewards, the electoral rewards of a high unemployment rate, etc. They're now sub 40.
They're being punished.
Exactly. They are now, well, I've got to try and work out, how the electoral system, people say it's 41, 40 point whatever percent, but they've got 39.7% of the seats in Parliament, so there, but it's certainly call it a 40% party, and the polls are indicating a further slippage, which I would expect. And we're seeing this enormous swing against sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but an enormous swing against the ruling party in urban areas, which is common across Africa. You saw it in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Zambia, etc. The urban population is the one that swings first. The only difference is they're 80% rural countries, and we're 68% urban countries.
Right.
And that's the strategic blunder of the ANC. They ruralized, and rather as a party, rather than looked at the urban thing, and they're actually losing ground quite a bit on that basis.
Okay, so it's 19 Rand and 1 cent to the dollar at the moment.
Much stronger, hey?
Yeah,
sorry,
so that's looking good. But it is Monday, so it could change again.
Who said 19 Rand to the dollar would be a good thing?
I know, but we were at a much worse position just a couple of days ago. So how do you see all of this going? Because people often will judge, I think, in a very binary sense, how well or poorly a country's doing just from currency exchanges. And that's a very, very simplified and not necessarily granular way of understanding economics. But where do you see the Rand going? Because I hear a lot of South Africans bemoaning the fact that, it doesn't matter how hard I work, it doesn't matter how much I get to take home. In the end, it's going to be worthless because this country is being run like a spaza shop and the government don't know what they're doing.
I think, firstly, one needs to understand. I've increasingly been looking at this, and I'm going to be very careful here because there's Muppets out there who's going to look at it and say, who do not understand the concept of a scenario as opposed to a forecast, as opposed to, understanding, the difference between sentiment and fundamentals. You've got them, and I think one tweet is there. So I've already put out there, a few years back, and that was ahead of the electoral conference, of the ANC. If Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma comes, we could have a collapse of sentiment and the Rand going to a big amount. And I said 60, but the point is it's not 60. That's the number. It's that you actually have that crash that is very common when you actually have a sudden withdrawal of confidence, etc. What we've got is the slow puncture. Okay, it's just easing out, and so you have a continual, and you'll have the rand fluctuating, and you'll have the volatility, etc. But the rand's not going back to 18. All right, it's shifting to a higher trading band at the moment, and the trend is weaker. And the reason is the effect of expropriation without compensation. I don't care how it gets spinned.
Yeah.
You know, zero is zero. You know, if you didn't intend that, why have that legislation? What's misinformation about that? Don't care how many procedures if you're going to take somebody's stuff for no compensation, it can never ever be. It's completely untenable, right? It doesn't matter, all right. But nevertheless, there's an odious political intention behind it, and we know it. You know, that may well see an acceleration of rand weakness going forward. Okay, and again, it's going to exacerbate the underperformance of the economy and also social stability if that is left to stand. That's why it's so critical that that gets clawed back. Okay, it's actually got to be clawed back. We've got to actually reestablish the rule of law.
Right.
Right. In other words, politicians, the Zondo Commission is there. Nobody of significance who's been mentioned, etc. We've got a prosecuting authority that was broken. And that's our point about impunity, is that you break the police, so no investigation gets done. If something slips through there, all right, then get to the prosecuting authority, which then is also broken. If something slips through there, you then have a magistrate that's not there. And if that slips through, there's the medical parole board, you know, that's on the other side.
Yeah.
You know, to actually
old
spring your comrades out of jail.
Exactly.
Right. So we've seen this before, but so far we haven't seen, you know, any convictions. And what will happen is they'll botch the prosecutions. And do you remember the Keppel murder?
Yeah.
Right. It says, I did it. I paid for it. You had all, but the prosecution was so bungled.
They're so
it was
stupid
thrown out.
they screwed up. Yeah.
Now that was deliberate.
Yeah, of
we know
course.
it was. Okay. And that's the point about a broken justice system where law is applied arbitrarily. If they feel like taking you on, they can conjure things up, right, if they want to, right? But if you have committed a crime, does it get even investigated? Well, we've seen it. The police will take a case and 3 days later they'll close it with lack of evidence, but the policeman just didn't do anything at all about it. No investigation at all, but closed, and that is off their books.
And these things have a cost too. I mean, there's so much other stuff I wanted to ask you. I haven't even given Leigh-Ann a chance here.
Sorry.
I'm just absorbing everything. It's fascinating.
But you talk about South Africa's economy and what it could be. Give us the best case scenario, because I always like to kind of look at what optimistically could really be achieved if we just got our act together, and then what the worst case scenario is too.
The ability to transact freely.
Yes.
If I want to actually do a transaction with you on full commercial, in other words, I think it's commercially optimal that I transact with you rather than you. Right, it's the nature of the game. That is a critical part of a prosperous economy.
Are you saying we don't have that now?
No, BE is an example of financial repression. Yeah. Right, it's financial repression where I can't just do a deal with you. I've actually got to include somebody else who I don't even know, etc. So that's the first thing. So you need to transact freely. You need to be able to enforce those contracts. So you got to.
So we need rule of law,
exactly,
and we need fair laws that don't discriminate.
Property rights. Those are the three legs. You can have other things in there. I don't care about minimum wage, for instance. If you've got those three things in place,
everything else will work.
for any economy that has those three things in place, you change from poor to rich in a single generation. You've seen this time and time again. And we've got all the elements. If we put those three things, we correct those three things, we will actually make up the lost ground. We will attract the investment. And yes, there's all sorts of other things. We need to be more competitive from a tax rate point of view. We've gone beyond the Laffer curve. We need to bring those tax rate down, etc. Dividend tax is one that needs to come because it just raises the hurdle rate. Right, if you've got, you see, if you have a look at an opportunity set, for instance, and it's the best of few, but there's, that's at the top. Your opportunity set, you don't want the worst thing, so you don't want. But the moment you say, I'm an investor, I want 20%, but there's this capital gains tax, so I actually need a project that yields 30%,
right,
so that I can get my 20%. All right. The 30% project's a lot harder to come by.
Sure.
All right. And that's what we need to do, see if we can lower the hurdle rate to unlock the potential of the country.
And you mentioned the Laffer curve. I think it's worth just explaining that to people who might not have heard it.
The Laffer curve was found at the beginning of the 80s when Thatcher took over. And tax rates were very, very high. You had the marginal tax rate that was over 90%. In other words, if you earned above a certain amount, they took it. Our marginal rate was 72%. That's when they introduced VAT, by the way, GST at the time.
Yeah.
But they introduced that so that they could reduce it. And so what happened is that tax rates were taken from that 90% right down to 40, in that region. And they thought with the bad finances that the UK economy was in, it's going to get even worse for the government, etc. Firstly, we're not here to solve the government's problem. They actually had to help serve us, but we're at the moment serving the government. But what they found, they cut it, and they actually got quite a bit more in at the 40% than they were getting at the 90%, and that's where this.
So it's like your Goldilocks zone of tax.
Yeah, so there's an optimal. There's an optimal point where you're extracting the maximum tax that taxes that'll get. Cigarette tax is another example, in that we cut it and reduce the incentive for smuggling and enforce the law properly, but we get more in. Okay, but you will not get more in by raising the taxes more.
Yeah.
Okay, you will not.
Yeah, but this is also a lack of imagination on the part of the people in charge of Treasury, because they only see one lever.
Yeah, but also one of the big things is that also happened in the 80s, which helped to end stagflation, is you had privatization. So you shifted from the government business model, and we see this with Eskom, say, what are my costs and what do I need to charge to cover my costs?
Right.
Whereas the private sector model says
to make profit.
No, they'll take a thing. What will the market bear, and what must my costs be for me to be in that market?
Right, so you cut your coat according to your cloth.
Exactly. And you can't just, there's a huge incentive to contain costs. And the government is run like this. We need to spend so much, so we need to raise taxes to that to cover it. Right. And we need to actually, you need to cut your expenditure to suit your tax base.
There's no way they're going to do that, though.
Well, we actually need we need to get a political. At the moment, it's a political establishment that is thinking at margins. We need our own Doge inside to actually say, is this necessary, and actually cut out the corruption of expenditure. If you just cut the corruption of not what it's for, in other words, take the ghosts out of SASSA. I actually don't believe there's 28 million people receiving. I think there's a lot. It's so difficult to get onto SASSA, all right, that people give up, right? But I think you put an application in, they've now got your details. They block it every way of your sense, but somebody's getting that money.
Sure.
that was.
I don't know. There's definitely fraud and corruption going on at an extraordinary level, and we also know that, like Doge has discovered in America, you've got 155-year-olds supposedly still on social welfare, and they've got disability grants, and they've got veteran
and illegals getting
grants,
on
and
whole lot.
all kinds of things, voting rights.
So we need that, and I think governments around the world are looking at this, looking at Argentina, looking at things to say the utter waste when you bring take the veil away, and your population, which is under this enormous burden of government, because of the tax take, they believe that the fruits of your labor, they're entitled
belong to them.
Yeah, and that's
so. Chris, I do want to rush this. We're meant to have stopped, and I wanted to find out from you what you think of what Javier Milei is doing in Argentina.
You know what happened? They cut expenditure, so that means the GDP went down, right? And then private sector, didn't compensate. But what happened is that the private sector shot up. Remember the multipliers in the private sector. Argentina is going to see an absolute boom next year. Right, it's still in the thing, but the growth is busy building up, and that boom is going to astonish people. The US is also going to go into a boom because they're cutting taxes, cutting regulations. In other words, government getting out of the way. Now that is, we don't appreciate we pay tax directly, but then we pay a hell of a lot of money to actually comply with regulation. Right, and these are costs that are unfunded. It raises the cost, so it keeps inflation down by cutting the regulation. And I'm not saying no regulation. I'm not that advocate, but any regulation that has any value, you can sell. If you, that's just me doing a thing. You can sell good regulation. If it's not adding value, you can't. It shouldn't be there as well. But these countries going into a boom where the US growth could actually, exceed 5% next year. It won't do it this year, but certainly 5%. And you may well see Argentine growth, at around the 9-10% mark.
That's very good. Okay, well, from your mouth to God's ears, let's hope that South Africa follows the best case scenario that you were talking about.
Yes.
I don't know that the Muppet system that we've got here is going to necessarily conform with sensible, pragmatic approaches, but we live in hope.
Yes.
And I do think that the world is a very, very interesting place to be watching right now, because it's all happening. We're living in real history in real time.
We've got real life case studies of if you do something completely
and you can see
different.
which ones are a total disaster and which ones are being already claimed as huge successes. Let's see which side of that coin we end up on.
Yes.
And I'm delighted to see you again. Keep doing the good work that you've been doing. I'm so pleased that all attempts to cancel you were failures all those years ago, and I wish you luck.
Thank you very much.
It's very nice to see you again, Chris.
Thank you very much, Gareth.
Thank you, Ass.
Thank you. I'm hoping we can maybe play out with, if Flex allows us to.
Yeah.
With the China Trump clip.
Oh yeah, they're having lots of fun with memes, right?
Yes,
Okay.
those memes, yes. But this is a Chinese guy who does impersonations of Trump.
All right, we'll
which
do
is
that
really good.
in a second. Just remember, next Monday we don't have a live show because we are all on holiday in South Africa on Monday next week. So Leigh-Ann will be back the following Monday. But here is a China, because he says China, China and Trump clip for you to end everything off. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on Wednesday.